Well then, why don't we get going, right? We got a workshop. We're gonna get into things. Let me get my mic out of the shot here. There you go. You're getting a little bit of behind the scenes exactly in front of you. How close can I get this without... There we go. I hope my voice is coming through loud and clear, and that you have a little bit of that that ambient music in the background without it being overpowering. Medium, when no one actually knows what they mean by medium, is the pain. Yeah, you know, just medium. Cook it all the way through, but only medium. Well, but medium is... But that's why some steakhouses actually will give you a visual guide about how you want it prepared. And they do that to help. Well, it's not even brown. It's still pink. It still has a warm pink middle to it, XCat. Unless the standards are different down in your part of the hemisphere. Oh, okay, gotcha. That's how you... All right. Culture, right? We're learning. Alrighty, so if you all want to follow along, it is on our Discord here. But I will drop the link in chat. So you can click on that, and there is there's the PDF that we're going to be going over. Now, for any of you who partake in Unearthed Arcana, after you review it, Wizards does also have a feedback survey that you can take. And it's on the same site which you can obtain the document here. If there's something you particularly like, and you want to see it in a printed rulebook, this would be an interesting opportunity for you to give that feedback. And then you could have a thumbprint on some sort of future printed material. I mean, the Circle of Spores Druid was Unearthed Arcana, and there was a lot of other content that was sort of teased or tickled before it was printed. Actually, look at the Races of Ravnica we did last week. All right, Unearthed Arcana of Ships and the Sea. These are optional rules, remember? Just because Wizards put this out does not mean that this is, it is compatible. Like, it is somehow fully compatible with 5e. Or that you can use these rules in an official, like, an Adventurers League setting. Pardon. They aren't officially a part of the game and aren't permitted in D&D Adventurers League events. And we go from there. Alright, ship stat blocks. A ship's stat block gives name details for use when a ship is involved in combat or other situations where its defensive and offensive capabilities are relevant. The stat block has three main parts: basic statistics, action options, and the ship's components. Ships can't take any actions on their own. Without any effort from its crew, a ship might drift on the water, come to a stop, or careen out of control. Most ships are large, huge, or gargantuan. A ship's size category is determined by the length or width, whichever is longer. For instance, a ship that is 10 feet long and 20 feet wide would use the size category that has a 20-foot width, which means the ship is gargantuan. Space. A ship doesn't have a square space unless its stat block specifies otherwise. For example, a ship that is 20 feet long and 10 feet wide occupies a 20 by 10 foot space. A ship can't move into a space that's too small to accommodate it, so there's no squeezing. If it tries to do so, it crashes, as described later in the crashing section. Now, of course, remember, there's an asterisk to all of this, which is, you know, your DM may rule otherwise. Is this thing being kind of... There we go. I hope that helps a little bit. All right. Capacity. A ship's stat block indicates how many creatures and how much cargo it can carry. Creatures include both the crew required to operate the vessel and any passengers who might ride along. Passengers could include Marines who repel boarders and lead the attack on monsters and enemy ships. Travel pace. The ship's travel pace determines how far the vessel can move per hour and per day. A ship's movement-related components, described later, determine how far the vessel can move each round. Now, I think it might be indicated... Oh, pardon me. It might be indicated a little bit later here. But whenever you're calculating... movement, every 10 feet per round translates to about a mile per hour. So if you have this like you have this barbarian monk with a 60 feet per round, I mean actually that's just like the normal speed even. That's a very brisk pace, right? So that'd be 6 miles per hour. Conversely, if you calculate out the 600 feet per round you get from Windwalk, that means you are traveling at about 60 miles an hour. A 60 mile an hour fly speed at that, by the way, in this gaseous form. That's pretty good. A ship's travel pace determines how far the vessel can move per hour per day. Okay, we got that. There are ability scores. Hey, Dark Wolf, welcome. There are dark scores that are dark scores. There are dark scores apparently. So, hello, Dark Wolf, and did you know there are ability scores on a ship? Or is she an ability wolf, and we're talking about dark scores on an ability wolf? Ship's strength represents its size and weight. Dexterity represents the ship's ease of handling. A ship's constitution covers its durability and the quality of its construction. Ships usually have a score of 0 in intelligence, wisdom, and a charisma. If a ship has a 0 in a score, it automatically fails any ability check or saving throw that uses that score. A ship's vulnerabilities, resistances, and immunities apply to all its components, unless otherwise noted in the stat block. If you're creating your own ship, they're usually immune to poison and psychic damage, and that makes sense, right? I mean, how are you going to poison... how are you going to poison a wooden ship? Now, if it's a living wooden ship... Think like the Weatherlight from Magic the Gathering. That might be affected or even be vulnerable because it's still living. In something that is an interesting note, ones crafted from metal or stone are also typically immune to necrotic damage. Now, that could be up to DM discretion. Could you use necrotic damage to oxidize iron and it rusts? Possibly. But if you, or maybe to somehow, like, advance the age of a rock and make it crumble, possibly. But if you think about necrotic damage as life force stealing or sapping, metal and rocks typically don't have that associated with them. And so a ship made of that material would most likely be immune to necrotic damage. Nadpoo, welcome! Yes, I did, in fact. I trimmed up, and I look all nice and pretty, don't I, Nadpoo? They're also immune to the following conditions: blinded, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, frightened, incapacitated, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, stunned, and unconscious. And I think that would make sense why. However, you do not see something like restrained, right? That's how you dock your boat. Yep, necrotic could very well be decay, and so decay may affect metal, but it is a point to consider. How would necrotic damage interact with stone or metal if there's not life force, or should I say, not life force, if there's not organic material to decompose? But if you look at it as decay, then you can oxidize iron, or you could erode rock. I do as well, not a singular form, but whatever form is required to the afflicted material. That's completely legitimate, Nadpoo and XCat. A ship is composed of different components. A ship's hull is its basic frame on which the other components are mounted. A control component is used to steer a ship. A movement component is the element of the ship that enables it to move, such as a set of sails or oars. Weapon. A ship capable of being used in combat has one or more weapon components, each of which is operated separately. A ship's component might have special rules described in the stat block. A component has an armor class. Its AC is meant to reflect its size and the materials used to construct it, and any defensive plating. There we go. Or armor used to augment its toughness. And it does have hit points. A ship component is destroyed and becomes unusable when it drops to 0 hit points. A ship is wrecked if its hull is destroyed. A ship component does not have hit dice. Now, we're going to get into a mechanic that is discussed in the monster manual and in the DMG, and that is called a damage threshold. And this is something that maybe not a lot of you have played with in D&D, but it exists. You know, have you ever wanted to lay siege to a castle, or, you know, break down a stone wall or something along those lines? This is how you could go about doing so. And the reason why I bring up the monster manual here. Let's go to Earth Elementals. Alright, if a ship component has a damage threshold, that threshold appears after its hit points. A component has immunity to all damage unless it takes an amount of damage equal to or greater than its damage threshold, in which case it takes damage as normal. Any damage that fails to meet or exceed the damage threshold is considered superficial and doesn't reduce the component's hit points. Alright, what that means, you're getting ready to set sail, and I don't know, you have a rapscallion for a first mate, who apparently has upset the local goblin tribe, because he might have pulled a Riker and was making contact with another culture, we'll put it, okay? Goblin chief doesn't like that, and comes running after you all with a couple others. And they have bows and arrows. Yeah, Nadpoo, you can ask an off-topic question. You're welcome to do so. Just because we're having a workshop about this doesn't mean that we still can't take some time to talk about other things here. So, you're good, brother. The Goblin Chieftain upset that that his perhaps his pure Goblin princess has been despoiled by the first mate, the rakish first mate of the crew, and tells the goblins to fire upon the vessel. And so these goblins have their little short bows, pew, pew, pew. And, you know, look at the AC, right? 13. It's going to be pretty easy to hit. But a short bow does what? D6 plus maybe 2 or 3 points of extra dex damage, correct? Well, what that's going to mean is you'll be able to collect a couple arrows out at the side of your ship, because the goblins aren't damaging your ship, at least not in a hit point mechanical fashion. Not until maybe their, you know, whatever, her older brother comes out swinging with a I don't know, like a flaming greatsword, you know, for the honor of his sister, and just whacks the side of the ship. Gets a critical hit, and now we're rolling 46 plus 5 strength. I mean, he's super swole, right? And let's say that he maxes out, and then there's like an extra D6 of fire damage on top of that, right? But I don't know. We'll even just keep it simple. Just say it's a critical hit. So we're rolling 46 plus 5, and we max out, and we get 24 with our 4 dice plus our 5 is 29. What that will mean, once I get to the damage threshold here, I'm going to find an entry for you. Okay, so here, for the ram, if someone wants to attack the ram of a ship, its damage threshold is 10. I guess in this case, even if it was 20. That critical hit will deal the full damage because it has overcome the damage threshold on this component. Right, hull, damage threshold 15. Damage threshold 15. But if we come down to a warship, let's take a look. Here we go. Damage threshold 20. So if we're sailing a warship, the Vengeful Goblin Brother is going to have to, like, crit with his greatsword to deal damage. And in that case, he'll deal, we said, so it's 24 plus, see, he'll deal 29 points of damage to a hull with 500 hit points. You know, give it a good, you know, a tag as the crew is on their way out. But the little boo, 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 the little bows and arrows, maybe if they're really good, or they get a crit with a short bow and the damage threshold is 10. But what I wanted to bring up for something like Earth Elemental, and by the way, in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, there are many monsters that have something like Siege Monster attached to it. I mean, you'd think in a city, you know, right? If you want to crumble things, if you want to blow up buildings or whatever. But look at an Earth Elemental. The Elemental deals double damage to objects and structures. Now, there are more monsters that are like this in the Monster Manual, but I did see a good amount of them also in the Ravnica Guide. In this case, for purposes of overcoming this damage threshold, I mean for overcoming it, but for just wrecking objects, you can have an ability like Siege Monster. Right? Or, so if we do a multi-attack here, and we hit, it's, we'll take the average of 14 bludgeoning damage. It's going to attack twice. So it's not going to deal 28 damage, or I guess it'll be technically 28 per hit. And so an Earth Elemental can wreck a ship. But think about it, right? A shipwreck, right? What does it do? It slams into rocks. You know, these immovable forces that are just destroy and shatter what's on them. You know, look at spells like Shatter and what they do to objects. All right, let me get back to Nadpu's question here. Let's see, you're making sure my DM today introduced 3 character backstory hooks. 2 of them being linked together by the DM. It was really cool, and there were only a couple of inconsistencies that can easily be overlooked. In general, is this a clever way to bond characters, or is this going to possibly go bad? One of my fellow players on my Tuesday game plays a Goblin Ranger. He seems pretty honorable, but he likes to steal doorknobs and cups and other fine china. An interesting proclivity. Well, look, Nadpu, a plan is a list of things that can go wrong. You know, I am sure that your DM has really good intentions, and there's an expression about good intentions also, right? Give your DM the benefit of the doubt that she or he has thought about this, and play. I mean, you don't have to just play along like, you got me, and I'm completely hooked, and I'm only going to do, the things that you know, you're telling me to do. But have some faith and realize that yes, things can go wrong, or there can be an inconsistency here or there, and sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief. You know, whether it's just for yourself or it's for the sake of the story at large. But yeah, give it a try, right? Go along with it. If you invest in it also, then you can help it, especially if you find a weak point. You can help bridge that weak point because you're not going against the story, you're going with it, and you're going to strengthen it. Xcat said you fought a Gogmazios, a monster hunter monster. I'm not familiar with that. Roger, does it not apply to fire, or will our ships not burn down? That would be a DM call. If for some reason fire is dealing double damage. But remember, depending on the circumstances, the ship's hull might not just be dry, brittle kindling. And there's going to be copious amounts of water around that are either in buckets waiting to put out fires, as sailors are going to be ready. You know, someone might be cleaning. It could be hauled up the side of the ship with a bucket on a rope. Or the wood is going to be saturated from waves, wind, spray, and all that other stuff. And wind also. Doesn't mean ships can't catch on fire. Let me see if... so if a fire elemental were to be summoned, if the target is a creature or a flammable object, it ignites. Until a creature takes an action to douse the fire, the target takes 5, or in this case 1d10 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. Now your DM might rule, Roger, that fire will overcome the damage threshold, maybe. Or will somehow reduce the damage threshold. So if it's 20, maybe if a fire source is 10 or greater, then the damage will go through, right? Because if we have a big warship and we do have this flaming greatsword that strikes against the side of it, or the goblins light their arrows on fire and shoot them, and they're only going to deal, 6 or 7 damage, part of that being fire. Is one flaming arrow going to cause damage to the hull of the ship? Maybe if there's an accelerant poured all over. But in this case, it's still going to have to overcome some kind of a damage threshold and other circumstances to ignite. So that would be a conversation to have with your DM as well, Roger. My little gnome almost died tonight to an airship ballista because he insulted a Cult of the Dragon member. They were a bad shot versus a giant, and my gnome said, maybe you should stick to reloading. He walked out of sight, and a ballista suddenly came rushing towards me and critically hit for 40... Oh my gosh. Yeah, oof indeed, Nadpoo. Intrigued by the idea and thought of trying something like that if I ever get into DMing, but wanted to see if there was a consensus about that kind of thing or not. My character was instantly hooked and almost selfishly redirected the entire party plans. Next session, after he's had a night to calm down, he's going to present the idea to a group and ask them for their help. Diadems, welcome! One more day of work than the weekend. Well, Diadems, I guess that means that I'm going to have to offer you a temptation, because I should be having some special stuff coming in tomorrow. But anyway, be aware that siege monsters, or I guess it's like special riders like this, can help overcome that. Here we go. And so damage threshold, by the way, is in your DMG as well. It gives you some thresholds for stone and wood and things. So if you want to bust down a door, if you want to, if you want to do all sorts of crazy stuff like that, it is in here. I don't have the particular page up. I should have thought about bookmarking that, and so I'm sorry in that case for not doing so. But you can find it in your DMG, so it'll give you the toughness of. Actually, it might be around here. So it'll give you the toughness for various materials. And then if you make a ship out of that material, then wouldn't you know, you can damage it. In fact, I had my Sunday group in my campaign end up they were in an underwater dungeon that had a riddle. And every time they answered the riddle incorrectly, it blasted them with hot water. And they got to a point where... here we go. Objects. So here's ACs to hit things. You're on page 246 of the DMG. object AC and object hit points. And here's damage threshold. But they got to a point where they said, you know what? Why go in through the front door when we could just go in through the side wall? And the druid was a shapeshifter one that could turn into elementals. And so turned into an earth elemental and just bashed in the wall. And they went around the riddle. As a DM, that kind of caught me by surprise because I wasn't prepared for that. So I had to stop. And actually, I had to look up these rules. Because I wasn't aware of how they did that in 5th Ed. This is really kind of the first time that this came up. But they ended up just going around it by bashing in the wall. Earth Elemental laid siege, and there you go. Imagination, howdy. XCat says, what damage type is hot water? Could fire resist help, or do you need something else? I was counting it as fire damage, right? So it was heat damage. Nadpoo says, does the DMG still have the riddles section? I don't think so? Question mark? If not, I haven't seen it, but I've either come up with my own riddles or I've found others that work in a situation, and either I'll present them raw or I'll just tweak them a little bit. Oh, thank you, Imagination. All right, actions. This part of the stat block specifies what the ship can do on its turn using its special actions rather than the actions used by creatures. It even relies on its own actions to move. It doesn't have a move otherwise. All right, basic stuff, right? Let's get into a sample stat block. In XCAT, you're talking about an airship. Here is a sample airship. So it's a gargantuan vehicle, 80 feet by 20 feet, and it's gargantuan by its length. Not by its girth. Creature capacity, 20 crew members and 10 passengers. Or, I mean, if you want 30 crew because you want to make it a warship, there you go. Cargo capacity, 1 ton. Which, 1 ton is not a lot. Bear that in mind. If you think about... here. One gallon of fresh water weighs a little over 8 pounds. Now, depending on how far you're traveling, and if like everyone needs a gallon of water per day, and if we presume that you can't just make water for whatever reason, I don't mean in that way, but I mean in like producing it magically. How much of your cargo capacity is going to be taken up by fresh water or food or luggage or other trade goods? So think about that and be careful. 1 ton in this instance is going to go very quickly. D&D content was what you need. Well, studio, I hope that the background, sort of the lapping waves and whatnot, isn't going to put you back to sleep here. But imagining these ships and building something, I think is going to be a lot of fun. 1,000 pounds of wonton soup. Hey, and that's true. This is, I mean, an airship is going to have a different cargo capacity, presumably for whatever is keeping it afloat. Nadpoo says, in traps, do you feel that just giving a DC is best for explaining the trap, and depending on the player's skill check, giving them tips on a proper disable method? Or does that entirely depend on the group or player doing the disarming? It's going to be dependent. If you, as a DM, don't really know how the trap works, but you just say, well, it's a lock that will stick a poison needle in your finger if you don't disarm it correctly. Like, do you have to explain the intricacies of a lock, or do you have your thief character interact with it and surpass a threshold? You can do it that way if you want. There are some DMs or even some PCs who are more curious and might want to discover that. Now, I love giving descriptions. And as a DM, a tried and true method is to offer a basic description and then let your PCs enrich it from that point forward. Think of it like anything else, especially in modules, right? As the characters enter a room, read or paraphrase the following, and then you read the block. But there's going to be more to the room, presumably, than just what is presented in a couple sentences. Because that represents everything that can just be seen by anyone who can see. It doesn't really take perceptions or insights or knowledges into account. And so, if I'm describing a hallway, and it looks like there's a lot of statues with O-shaped mouths. And there's a skeleton across from one of the statues, like across the hall from one of the statues. Then the players might go up and determine with a medicine check or something. It looks like this person died. In fact, the spear might even still be sticking out of the skeleton. Right? No one had been to the temple since this thief came by, so it was never reset. You know, there's not infinite spears inside the mouths of these, or darts or whatever, inside the mouths of the statues. And so you can use that as foreshadowing or a clue. But, I don't know, let's say that the spear was gone. In fact, maybe for all the party knew, there was actually 3 tomb robbers. And so one of them, even if it was 100 years ago, bit it by getting impaled by a spear. The others took the spear because it could come in handy. They might even find it later. But when they examine the bones, they can find a shattered rib somewhere, like a front and back, telling the story about how he was impaled completely by a spear. And so, you know, that one statue has been used up, but that might mean that the 10 other statues are ready to go. And that could be a hint in how you have to navigate the hallway and or how you want to try and block or dismantle the other traps. I hope that helps answer your question, Nadpoo. Dr. Derpy Dingleberry's here. Hey, it's good to see you, sir. It's going very well. We're getting into the new Unearthed Arcana, which is talking about boats, or in this, we have an airship, actually, first up. And then we're going to be making a crew member. We're going to be making the cook of a ship that we're going to design this week on the stream. And you know, you're always welcome to throw out your questions, or if you have any other comments or concerns. And I hope that you are having a fun time in your own D&D game, in your Underdark game, sir. Imagination, I love that collaboration too with the players giving flavor text. Really helps to have players that are cooperative like that. Yeah, and you know what? Imagination, you running Curse of Strahd are getting a very good feel for this. Because there are a lot of text boxes that will just say, the room, you know, it's a long hallway that has some cobwebs hanging from the top rafters. And that's what everyone gets. And you know what? Your PCs might not bite on any of those details and will just walk down the hallway, in which case something will or won't happen. Or someone who's interested in spiders might say, you know what? I want to investigate. You said there's cobwebs, right? And you go, uh-huh. And the person says, yeah, I want to go get a little closer. Maybe I can identify what's going on. And of course, then, you know, so you described with just a couple sentences a hallway, rafters, and there's even like some roof above that. There could be a treasure up there. There could be a monster up there. There could just be a monster corpse. Maybe it's just it's a big spider, but it's already, you know, flipped on its back with its legs curled in. It just kind of dried up. So it's still kind of a spook, but you know, it's not deadly. And you can have so much fun with it, and your PCs are going to help your world come alive. You present a field of options, and they're going to boop 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 select which ones they want to, with the ones that they want to interact with. Very helpful. Love asking questions here. Between you and the community, I learn a good bit. That's how you learn, Nadpoo. And you know what? You may even offer a question that some of us may have never have even considered, and it's good to do so. Sounds pretty cool. I've been streaming less D&D recently. You lost your job recently and got a new one, so my timing is a little off. Really hard to do late night. Oh. Well, you know what? I'm sorry to hear you lost it, but I'm glad that you're back into it. It's a tough thing to go through, because bills don't stop, and but I'm glad you're into it, and you're still in there as much as you can, Doctor. XCat, tell the PCs to roll initiative when they see the spider, but when it's spider's turn, you tell them it was already dead. You can build tension by doing that. Also, sometimes as a DM, you just roll some dice. There's not really a reason for it, but you do it. You just sort of, you pretend. All right, so anyway, cargo capacity on this sample airship, which of course you can buff up if you want. Not travel pace 9 miles per hour. Now, why does it say 216 miles per day? Probably because there's not a bunch of oarsmen that are having to take shifts or only go on one shift. Here's a sample hull. Now you'll notice the hull on the airship. The hull on the airship does not have a damage threshold. And we can presume that because of that, it's made of some light material. It could even be leather, or it could be a lightweight wood, or a very thin wood. And so in this case, if the airship were to dock, and the Goblin Princess were to get Rikered, then those goblin arrows will actually be doing some damage to the hull of the airship. So anyway, so we have our hull. We have, this is our control method, is the helm. Right? It has its own AC. It has its own pool of hit points. Right? If we're going to play Guns of Icarus in D&D, if you want to, let's say you want to capture the airship, you might not want to destroy the hull. You might not want to destroy the elemental engine. But you might want to destroy the helm. And so you can target the helm, which has its own AC and its own pool of hit points. So that way you can disable the ship without sinking the ship or destroying it. Move up to the speed of its elemental engine with 190-degree turn. If the helm is destroyed, the airship can't turn. It has 4 ballistae, AE. Same thing. You want to take out the guns? Take out the guns. We'll play Guns of Icarus in D&D. We'll play 3 D&D. Ranged weapon attack. And if you have, I don't know, you have a gunner character, you may just want to replace the +6 to hit. Unless for some reason, I don't know, you want it as automatic targeting, right? An elemental, like a wind elemental, is somehow like, powering it, is providing like a kind of a guided ballista bolt effect. These are simply baseline. Use your imagination and have fun. Actions. On its turn, the airship can use its helm to move using its elemental engine. It can also fire its ballistas. If it has half its crew or fewer, it can fire only 2 of the ballistas. Dr. Derpy says, I asked an interesting question in a recent campaign. I asked if Sorks can twin spell Ice Knife. After talking for a bit, he allowed it. Communication is key, and even if it breaks the rules, your DM has accommodated your request by considering it, and then is going to make necessary adjustments in the course of your campaign. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. And you know what? Your DM might say, no, I can't allow it. I'm sorry, I'm not ready for that. And that's fine. But at least you threw it out there. Or you might even get a no, but give me a couple weeks to think about it and I'll see what we can do. Or a no, but you have to go through a magical training process, and I'll open it up to you. But your DM can't run things that you are not highlighting or wanting to have attention brought to. Your DM is simply providing you a bunch of hooks or buttons that you can press and then choose to interact with the world. XCat, you think you're almost ready to run your game? Aha. Very good, sir. Nephew says, I first started playing under a DM that did a lot of that dice rolling, and every time I would be on edge. And when nothing would happen, then nothing would happen. Now being initiated, I giggle when I see my current DMs doing that to the uninitiated. Ah, yes. It's a good tradition to pass down, isn't it? Yeah, it appears, yeah. Yeah, that kind of explanation and negotiation works very well, Doctor. Now, from here, I'm not going to get into all the different ships because we've gone over the mechanics, right? We have a basic understanding of how it's going to work. You know, do you want a big galley, 130 feet by 20 feet, 80 crew, 40 passengers, cargo capacity 150 tons. It moves 4 miles an hour, but you know what can you do? This one, armor class 15, damage threshold 20. This is a big boy ship. Control helm, movement sails, and movement oars. And note this as well, hit points. The sails have 100 hit points. However, you get minus 10 feet speed per 25 damage taken. Water locomotion, sails speed 35 feet, 15 feet while sailing into the wind, 50 while sailing with it. Oars, same thing. You know, if the oars are damaged, then you start losing mobility over time. Weapons, ballistas and mangonels. And a ram. A galley is going to put in a lot of work for you here. On its turn, the galley can move using its helm. It can also fire its ballistas and its mangonels. If it has half its crew or fewer, it moves half speed and can only fire... Oh, and we have a cat. A keel boat, 60 by 20. And by the way, if you look up these boats, you'll see that they serve different functions, and you can also find different designs for the different classifications, right? It's not a ship, it's a schooner. A schooner is a ship. if any of you remember that from Mallrats. So keelboat, it still has a damage threshold. It's lower, but its cargo capacity is only half a ton. So this is not a big hauler, right? 3 crew and 4 passengers. This is more recreational, or maybe, you know, just sort of local trading. Longship, 70 by 20. 40 crew and 100 passengers. Rowboat, 2 crew and 2 passengers. 3 miles an hour. Now, this says 24 miles per day. Now, what that's hinting, I mean, not that a rowboat has to stop, because the boat itself isn't driving. Right? It doesn't have an elemental engine to it. In this case, it's someone who's actually sitting there and rowing. And the person is presumably only going to row for 8 hours on a shift. That means you could go, if you have 3 shifts, you know, 4 people in the boat, and people are taking turns, sleeping, rowing, or whatever, you know, then that can increase, right? So we go to 48, then we go to 76. So it could move 76 miles per day if people are taking turns and not suffering from exhaustion or the like. Control and movement are its oars. Sailing ship. A warship. Here we go. 40 crew, 60 passengers. Damage threshold 20. Has sails and oars. Ballistas, mangonels, and a ram. $200 tons. Now, if you want to include other forms of damage, like cannons and the like, you can go to your DMG, and there's rules for explosives and the like. So please consider that. I think the cat provides full cover while prone. You don't want to shoot near the kitty and accidentally hit. Well, he's providing some, at least partial cover to my keyboard, because he's laying on his side. He's laying on his side on the little strip of desk between me and... so his feet are against me, and his back is resting on the wrist rest of my keyboard here. How'd you go about increasing or decreasing that due to currents, though? If you take a look at the entries here, Nadpoo, 35 feet, 15 while sailing into the wind, or 50 while sailing with the wind. And so, if you want to choose somewhere between 15 and 50, you know, depending on the course that you're tacking, it's giving you a range. Of course, you can have a 0, right? You enter into doldrums. There's no wind. Or, if we come over to the magic items, look at, let's see, I want Q for qual. Here we go. Qual's Feather Token, a fan. If you are on a boat or ship, you can use an action to toss the token up to 10 feet in the air. The token disappears and a giant flapping fan takes its place. The fan floats and creates a wind strong enough to fill the sails of one ship, increasing its speed by 5 miles per hour for 8 hours. You can dismiss the fan as an action. Oh, Bunny Love, thank you. I very much appreciate that, Bunny Love. Now, Bunny, is that just a thank you and a contribution to the community? Or are you saving up? Do you want to sponsor a box of miniatures? But thank you very much for that. And you know what? This guy down here, my cat, to be specific, if you weren't here earlier, you know what? He's going to thank you also for making sure he gets some special bonus treats for being a good boy on camera. Would a druid's gust of wind be too strong for a sail to handle, you think? Support, well, thank you very much, Bunny Love. I wanted to make sure I clarified, Doctor, because that could have been taken the wrong way. And I didn't want that to happen. I don't know if gust of wind would be too strong necessarily, Nadpoo. Something you have to consider is if the wind is coming from you, I guess the spell wouldn't be applying the equal but opposite force. Which is why you can't just install a fan on the deck of a ship and have the fan blow you forward, because the fan would be blowing you backward also. Hey, Astreus, welcome. I mean, it might be strong enough, but I don't know if gust of wind lasts long enough. Now, something like control weather. Druids are excellent on the seas, by the way. Gust of wind. A line of strong wind, 60 feet long and 10 feet wide, blasts from you in the direction you choose. Each creature that starts its turn in the line. Concentration up to a minute. You could probably get a little bit of a boost from that wind. You know, I don't know if it'll even necessarily equate to something like you know, hitting the nitro button in your, you know, Fast and Furious car. Maybe it will. I guess that could depend on the DM and how you're narrating or how you're using it. But there are special things like Qual's Feather Token, like the fan here. Or there could be spells like Gust of Wind that might be able to give you that kind of like that initial boost out of the gate. Oh, Diadems, thank you.
6 wonderful months, Matty.
6 wonderful months, Matty. Thank you very much, Diadems. Hype, and I appreciate that. Storm Guide from Sorcerer would do work for boats as well, says Doctor. Yeah, if you all have suggestions, throw it out there. If it's windy, you can use a bonus action each round to choose the direction that wind blows. The wind blows in that direction at the end of your next turn. Yeah, it doesn't alter the speed. All right, so thank you for the clarification on that, Doctor. So those are things to think about. And, of course, you know, there are always ores. Or, you know what, if we're talking about elemental engines, Eberron has this with airships and trains and the like. By the way, I folded his ear back because that's what you do to cats. And he's tanking it like a champ. No, don't look. Don't look. My shame. But he's not doing anything about his ear that's folded inside out. Alright, now let's get to our ossifers. If you'd like to explore running a ship, it needs officers to oversee its operations. Officers who fill 6 different roles. A person can fill only one role at a time, though multiple people can be assigned to a single role. Some roles aboard a ship reflect the need for trained experts to direct a crew's efforts. Others focus on keeping the crew's health and morale in order. Each role is described below, along with the abilities and proficiencies that help a character excel at it, but that aren't required. Captain. The captain issues orders. The best captains have high intelligence and charisma scores, as well as proficiency with water vehicles and the intimidation and persuasion skills. Now, these aren't necessarily offered as backgrounds, but they almost could be, right? And I think these are things that we should consider for the crew that we're going to be making. So we're going to start with the cook. Oh, there's a cat butt. It's almost an official stream, everyone. So what we can do, because these are very specialized PCs we're making, as a DM, I think we could be a little bit generous and give them some bonus skills. Or, if you didn't want to give bonus skills, you can always replace the skills that would otherwise have been available. You know, someone grew up as an urchin, but maybe instead of, sleight of hand and deceit, or deception, you instead just grant them persuasion and, if it's a captain, kind of grew up out of that phase, but still some of the aspects of an urchin. We could make them all sailors if we wanted to. But I think what would be interesting, let's make the characters as normal. One of them might even randomly get sailor. But I want to add these skills to them, because it's a highly specialized role. And we're talking about officers on a ship, not just random crew. And then if they need a secondary stat of some kind, for instance, intelligence and charisma is good for a captain, then even if we make a barbarian, let's make a barbarian captain that has a high charisma and see where it goes. Or a high intelligence instead. Alright, captain issues orders. The best captains have high intelligence and charisma scores, as well as a proficiency with water vehicles and the intimidation and persuasion skills. First mate. This specialist keeps the crew's morale up by providing close supervision, encouragement, and discipline. A first mate benefits from a high charisma score, as well as proficiency with the intimidation and persuasion skills. A bosun. The bosun provides technical advice to the captain and crew and leads a repair and maintenance leads repair and maintenance efforts. A good bosun has a high strength score, as well as proficiency with carpenter's tools and the athletics skill. So we have our Picard, we have our Riker, and now we have our LaForge. Quartermaster. The quartermaster plots the ship's course, relying on knowledge of nautical charts and a study of weather and sea conditions. A reliable quartermaster tends to have high wisdom score, as well as the proficiency with navigator's tools and the nature skill. There's our data. Surgeon. The ship's surgeon tends to injuries, keeps illnesses from spreading throughout the ship, and oversees sanitation. A capable surgeon benefits from a high intelligence score, as well as proficiency with herbalism kits and the medicine skill. There's our crusher. I guess it depends on the season. And lastly, our cook. A ship's cook works with the limited ingredients aboard a ship to make meals. A skilled cook keeps the crew's morale in top shape, while a poor one drags down the entire crew's performance. A talented cook has a high constitution score, as well as proficiency with brewer supplies and cook's utensils. I mean, we could say Guinan, but I think let's jump into Voyager and just say Neelix fits this to a T. We have our Neelix. I guess we could just stick with Voyager if we really wanted, right? So we have our Janeway, our Chakotay. We have our... Who's our bosun? Our bosun would be Torres. Our quartermaster, depending on the depending on the season, it could be 7 of 9. Although maybe more Paris. Our surgeon is the doctor, our hologram. That he's going to be fun because we're going to make our surgeon tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. And our cook would be Neelix. Yeah, Dr. Derpy, but Ossifer, the light was blue. I'm not as think as you drunk I am. Nadpoo says, I fold my dog's ears back sometimes. It makes her look like Princess Leia. That's great. Estrella says, my group's DM asked me if I'd like to DM for the group every couple of weeks. Said I'm really good at making up stories and thinks I'll be good at it. I'm really excited. That's awesome, Estrella. And you know what? If we can help support you, like if you're nervous or you want an idea or you have an idea and you want some polish on it, come to us. Let's communicate and let's help you present something awesome to your group. And I'll tell you what, I don't think anyone in the group would feel like, oh well, you're taking my ideas. But you know, even if that were the case, which it's not, I will still happily help you because I want to make sure that you have awesome ideas that you're rocking at your table and you're making memories with your friends. Proficiencies gained from training is a thing, so professionals having those proficiencies makes sense. I agree, and that's also something else that maybe DMs can overlook at points. You know, if you have a PC that's specially training in something, a skill or a set of tools, a language, don't be afraid to grant it to them if the circumstances are appropriate to you. Now, a PC might force an upgrade by taking the skilled feat, if you do allow feats. If you don't allow feats, I don't know. Then I guess you can only train through the course of the story. But that is something where if you as a DM have a PC that wants to learn how to speak Orcish, and you have an orc in the party, and these two are just always, they're saying, yeah, as we travel, we have this downtime, or even in combat, we practice shouting out commands to each other. You may want to then, after some point in time, give them Orcish as a spoken language. And then we'll work on the writing and reading later. Because, and don't be afraid to do that either, right? There are 3 layers to learning a language. There's the spoken word, the written word, and being able to read the language. Or you could even put Orcish simple or something in parentheses. So I mean, if in the stereotype, Orcish might not sound elegant, but you, even though you're like some, 15th level wizard, would still be going to the orc tribe going, me wizard, make big boom in sky. Meanwhile, I mean, to orcs, that might be how they would communicate, but to you, you're communicating in that simple form. Because you only know spoken Orcish, and only kind of shaky at that. I'll be asking for lots of ideas. I'm going to run Matthew Colville's Intro to DMing Adventure just to get a feel for it, and then be going on my own. There you go, Astreus. The PHB recommends 250 days to train for a proficiency with some costs associated, but recommends the DM change to fit as it should be. Yep, and in fact, you as a DM might even say, all right, everyone make level 1 characters, and then what I want you to do is I want you to put a line in a skill or a tool which you're working on being proficient in, but you haven't quite reached there yet. And then what you might do is after less time in the campaign or in the story, you can have them fill in that bubble instead of just the line to indicate that, yeah, you know what, maybe it did take 250 days, but we're presuming that for 200 days before the campaign started, you've been training and you're getting ready to now just get to work. Half Orcish, half Spanish. It's Sporkish. Hey, Roger, yeah. And Bunny Love, yes, he's for the cat. He is 16 pounds of fuzz and love. He is amazing. And you know what? He was a stray that someone brought to the store one day. That was the tabby cat. If anyone's just joining us, I had my tabby up here on the desk with me. Crew. A ship requires a number of able-bodied sailors to crew it, as specified in its stat block. A crew's skill, experience, morale, and health are defined by its quality score. A crew starts with a quality score of +4, and that score varies over time, going as low as -10 and as high as +10. It decreases as a crew takes casualties, suffers hardship, or endures poor health. It increases if the crew enjoys high morale, has good health care, and receives clear, fair leadership. A typical crew member uses the commoner stat block in the monster manual. And here you go. Now remember that commoner is kind of by default just average human. If you want an elven commoner, take that stat block up above and apply the elf racial traits from the player's handbook to it, including the bonuses to ability scores. That alone won't necessarily, change it up too much. It might make it into like a 1/8 from a 0 by applying a couple minor stat blocks or something along those lines. Or maybe like a resistance to something. So it's recommending use commoner. Now, if you want something more, for instance, if you want to split your crew and not just have them all be commoners, or elven or dwarven commoners, or you could mix it up. Maybe you want a couple of your crew to have the stats of a berserker. They're strong. They're very specialized. They're not just kind of anyone you hopefully you didn't press gang them on a dock, but you recruited them specifically for a role on the ship. Hey Shlomo, welcome. You ruffled hard at the sporkish comment, Dr. Derpy says. Loyalty and quality. When dealing with an individual member of the crew, you might find it useful to use the optional loyalty rule from Chapter 4 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now let's go to that real quick. Fear and horror, rest variants, explosives, bombs, gunpowder, dynamite, including also things like automatic rifles and antimatter rifles, by the way. Bombs, gunpowders, grenades, dynamite. So you might want that for your ship. Combat options, initiative variants, side initiative, speed factor. Lots of good variants in here. let me find. Yep, that's custom stuff there. Modifying. New subrace. Background. Nope, I guess it's a little bit before that. To the table of contents. NPCs, contacts. I don't know. I thought it might have been next to Madness and Honor. Extreme cold, foraging, becoming lost. Underwater. Random encounters at sea, which is something that we're going to be doing. And the sky, because we do get into airships in the DMG. It talks about them. We will talk about downtime activities as well. Building a stronghold. Da, 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 da. Well, shoot. I'll have to find that at some other point in time then. So sorry I didn't have it handy. Unless any of you found it. Is there any lore tied to those antimatter rifles, or are they just in the book? They're just in the book. They provide stats about what an antimatter rifle could do, or bombs. And if you want to make them more powerful, make them more powerful. If you want to make a flintlock be as powerful as an automatic, like a modern hunting rifle or a combat rifle, go ahead and do so. As for things like explosives, it starts on page 267 XCAT. And it goes 268. I mean, it could talk about how you can work it into your campaign, but it's not like mind flayers are an alien species, because this is something that could possibly exist. Mind flayers are an invading alien species whose ship has crashed, but they kind of crashed through the crust of the earth in the Underdark, and they're looking to take over people's brains, because that's just what they do as an alien species. TOA is over. Our group will start Dragon Heist in 5 to 6 weeks. No spoilers. I won't offer any spoilers to you, Shlomo, but I'm glad that you had... I hope you had fun in Tomb of Annihilation, and that you had an ending that was good? Appropriate. Maybe appropriate's the best term. Okay, mutiny. A poorly led or mistreated crew might turn against its officers once per day. If a crew's quality score is lower than 0, the captain must make a charisma check modified by the crew's quality score. If the check total is between 1 and 9, the crew's quality score decreases by 1. If the check total is 0 or lower, the crew mutinies. They become hostile to the officers and might attempt to kill them, imprison them, or throw them overboard. The crew can be cowed into obedience through violence, combat, or offers of treasure and other rewards. When the DM ends the mutiny, the crew's quality score increases by 1d4. And shore leave. Shore leave can increase quality for a little bit. Travel at sea. Here are some rules to help adjudicate travel at sea. Specifically, travel of an hour or more. This material builds on the travel rules in the player's handbook. Ships travel at a speed given in their stat blocks. Unlike with land travel, players can't choose to move at a faster pace, though they can choose to go slower. So what that's telling you is if all your sails are unfurled, right? Your anchor has been weighed. All your sails are down. This is what your max speed is going to be in that circumstance. If you don't have all your sails down, then you can choose to go slower. And there are, as we discussed, there are ways you could increase your speed that are going to go above and beyond these general rules that are here. Ships travel at a speed given in their stat blocks. Unlike with land travel, players can't choose to move at a faster pace. All right, we got there. If a ship's mode of movement takes damage, it might be slowed. And we saw that in the stat lines for the different ships. Activity while traveling. The activities available to a ship's crew and passengers are a bit different from the options available to a group traveling by land. Refer to activity while traveling in Chapter 8 of the Player's Handbook. Here we go. For more information on some of the topics discussed below. And by the way, downtime activities are really good for a campaign. And if you want more options for downtime activities, don't forget to consult Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which has, and by the way, Nadpoo, Xanathar's Guide can help you if you want to go through the mechanics of a trap. This will go into more detail about traps for you, or with you, I should say, if you get a Xanathar's Guide. Xanathar's is an excellent book to pick up. It's not a core rule book, but it's darn close. But here, we have all kinds of downtime also, including obtaining a rival, and that's fun. Anyway, so some downtime activities. You can draw a map. A ship's captain often undertakes this activity. You can forage. The character casts out fishing lines, keeping an eye out for sources of food. Raise morale. This is limited to first mate only, as it's written. Could anyone do it? Sure. Do you have a, I don't know, you have a swabby that's a bard and sings some very lewd sea shanties. And that raises the morale because everyone's like, yeah, you know, once we get into port, I'm going to see my Sally, or, you know, because the sailor might have a girl in that port, might have a girl in every port. Or she might have a girl in every port, or she might have a guy in every port. Or one. Whatever. It's the year 118 in D&D. We can do what we want. But generally, it is going to be something that is relegated to someone of ranking on the ship, right? Because that everyone would look up to this officer to do a particular thing, not necessarily Swabby Joe over, you know, just singing a lewd song. Navigate, quartermaster only. Quartermaster can try and prevent the group from becoming lost. You can notice threats. You can repair your ship, right? I mean, that goblin tagged us on the way out from our first mate becoming the goblin princess's first mate, if you get what I'm saying. And we took that hit from you know, a very angry brother and a couple arrows to the hull of the ship. The bosun's gonna have to go out with him or herself, and maybe even a small crew, go over the side of the ship and try and repair some of it. A sword with intelligence in every port. An undead in every port. That's right, elect me captain, and I'll make sure that we have undead in every port. What does that say about our crew? Especially for the ones making it. Component other than the hull had 0 hit points. It becomes functional again. Stealth, captain only. The ship's captain can engage in this activity only if the weather conditions restrict visibility, such as in heavy fog. The ship makes a dexterity check with a bonus equal to the crew's quality score to determine if it can hide. Hazards. Hazards come in 2 basic types: environmental, such as storms or turbulent waters, and other events, such as fire aboard the ship or a plague outbreak. Welcome back, XCat. Icebergs choke a misty sea. Winds and towering waves threaten to capsize a ship. Snowstorms batter ships that venture north too late in the year. These are all examples of environmental hazards that can last for days and demand a crew's attention. Each day a ship spends involved in a hazard requires the officers to each make a special ability check, as shown on the hazards check table. This check takes the place of any other activities that the officer might undertake and represents the officer's contribution to keeping the ship afloat. Hazard checks. Captain, intelligence, water vehicles. First mate, charisma, intimidation. Bosun, strength, carpenter's tools. Quartermaster, wisdom, nature. Surgeon, intelligence, medicine. Cook, constitution, cook's utensils. If there is no one available to make a check, treat the result as a 0. Finally, roll a d20 for the crew using its quality score as a modifier to the roll. Add up all of these checks and then refer to the hazard check results table. That table shows if the ship has met with disaster or success in surviving that day of the hazard. Here we go. Big numbers, 140 plus, great success. The crew's quality score increases for a short time. I was going to say something and I'll get to it. Anyway. Ship survives unscathed. Partial disaster. Each component takes 4d10 bludgeoning damage. And the crew's quality score is reduced by 1. The ship struggles, moving at half speed. Or disaster. Oh no. If you want to add variety to hazards, consider including some interesting complications. For example, a whirlpool might drag a ship to the elemental plane of water on a disaster result, with the ship avoiding the vortex on any other result. You can also add or subtract to the success thresholds of the hazard check results table to reflect a hazard's danger. If you decide to do so, increase or decrease a threshold by 35. Other events. In addition to rough seas and daunting weather, a ship might face a number of other threats. The hazards below serve as examples of what can go wrong with a ship. Each one requires a different officer to spend a day dealing with the hazard instead of engaging in any other activity. As a rule of thumb, there is a 10% chance each day that one of the following events occurs. Emergency maneuvers. Crew must react quickly to avoid a sudden threat. A kraken passes below the ship, threatening to capsize it in its wake, or the ship is about to crash into an uncharted reef. And so we're going over some, I guess, traps that a ship can encounter. Conflict. Life at sea is a mixture of monotony, hard work, and sudden moments of terror. The stress can wear on the stoutest sailor. Sometimes that stress turns into a conflict among the crew. If dissension spreads in the ranks, the first mate's activity that day must be spent making an intimidation check to control the crew. Fire. Fire at sea can render a ship unable to function. Plague. Illness sweeps through the ranks. Surgeon can make a medicine check. Infestation. Beetles, rats, or other pests can infest the ship, threatening food stores. The cook must make a DC 15 Constitution check to save what food they can. On a failed check, the crew has disadvantage on any checks involving quality score until the ship has a chance to restock supplies. So there's something here for everyone. Ships in combat. Now we're getting to some juicy stuff, aren't we? Ship rolls its initiative using its dexterity, and it uses its crew quality score as a modifier to that roll. On a ship's turn, the captain decides which of the ship's actions to use. There are special officer actions. During an encounter, the captain, first mate, and bosun each have access to 2 special action options described below. Full speed ahead and fire at will. Full speed ahead. As an action while on deck, the captain, first mate, or bosun can exhort a crew to work harder and drive a ship forward. Roll a d6 and multiply the result by 5. Apply the total as a bonus to the ship's speed until the end of the ship's next turn. If this bonus is applied to a ship's speed when the ship is already moving faster than normal, use the higher result. Don't add the 2 bonuses together. And fire at will. As an action, the captain, first mate, or bosun aids the crew in aiming one of the ship's weapons. Select one of the ship's weapons that is within 10 feet of the officer. It gains advantage on the next attack roll it makes before the end of the ship's next turn. I know, poor Will. What did Will do to this crew? Some act of villainy, that's for sure. XCat, does the water elemental plane have a surface in canon base D&D, or is it all underwater? Because I've heard conflicting information. I'm not sure what's right. If you go to your Dungeon Master's Guide... Now, this is per the DMG. A plane can be anything you want it to be, XCat. I mean, if you don't want it to be all completely underwater, you don't have to make it as such. But there's a whole section here that does talk about the various planes that you can play on here in your multiverse. Astral, Ethereal, Feywild, Shadowfell. Here's some inner planes. Elemental Chaos, Plane of Air, Earth, Fire, and Plane of Water. Plane of Water, right here for you. I'll keep it up as I'm reading over on the side. Otherwise, it's on page 56 for you. Crashing. If a ship moves into the space occupied by a creature or object, it might crash. A ship avoids crashing if the creature or object is at least 2 sizes smaller than it. When a ship crashes, it must immediately make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, it takes damage to its hull based on the size of the creature or object it crashed into, as shown on the crash damage table. It also stops moving if the object or creature is bigger than it or 1 size smaller. Otherwise, the ship continues moving and the creature or object moves to the nearest unoccupied space that is not in the ship's path. At the DM's discretion, an object that is forced to move but is fixed in place is instead destroyed. The base game lore, you're going to have to consult the DMG, because remember, I don't play with other planes. So I don't have a lot of experience in bringing people to them, or what is considered to be, I guess, DMG standard issue plane of water. So, hey, you know what? It could be a weakness or a liability as a DM that I haven't had exposure to all of this stuff, but at least I'm going to tell it to you straight, XCat. Other planes are just not my forte. At least not when it comes to what people are considering to be official, like, canon lore. I could create planes all day long, but you're going to have to read up here for it. Got it. All right. Crash damage is here. Creature struck must make a dexterity saving throw with a DC equal to 10 plus the ship's strength modifier, taking damage based on the ship's size, as shown in the crash damage table, on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. So, what does that mean? If you're in the water and you have a ship that's kind of bearing down on you here, you could not come back up after getting bopped by that thing. Owning a ship. If you purchase a ship, you have unlocked an exciting new adventure an exciting new venue for adventure and signed up for a mountain of logistical challenges. This is what I wanted to bring up earlier. What we're talking about here is just as it says. You are bringing up now sort of an accounting mini game, right? You're going to be tracking money, morale, the quality of your crew. You're going to be tracking your actions. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Doing like accounting, survival, resource marshaling can be fun and exciting. And that's what we're going to be doing over this week and next week. Is we're going to make a campaign around this concept. I'm happy that this supplement did say, though, you're signing up for a mountain of logistical challenges, right? Because daily you're tracking a bunch of things that are occurring. Well, so you could do in-game checks that way, but I think this what is more being referred to is how much gold is in the ship's coffers. Can you pay your crew? How many days of food is left in your galley? How fast are you going on a particular day? Because you're generating wind currents, and are you going for or against the wind, and any modifiers? And then, of course, the crew might get a little rowdy that day for some reason, and And there you go. So there's a lot of out-of-character things that you are opening yourself up to manage. Keeping a ship functioning requires a tremendous amount of work. The rules use a downtime activity, managing a ship, to abstractly represent the effort needed to keep a ship functioning, its supplies stocked, and crew paid. See the DMG and Xanathar's guide for more information on downtime activities. And yes, so make sure that you're referencing this for some really good ideas. All right, by hiring a competent captain and crew and putting them to work, hauling cargo, or otherwise offering their services, you can make it possible for a ship to remain in good repair and even generate a profit for you between adventures. Managing a ship is a downtime activity that requires time and effort to recruit an officer and crew. The ship is available for use when needed. Otherwise, the ship hauls passengers and cargo to cover the cost of maintaining the ship and paying the crew. It takes 1 week to recruit a crew and 100 plus 46 gold to cover the cost of recruitment and supplies. Once you've paid these costs, you have a captain and crew to maintain the ship. Once you have a working ship, it turns a small profit each month. Pardon me. At the end of every 4 weeks, you can earn 5d20 gold. A ship owner runs the risk, and so this is saying profit. Right? So you're taking care of the basics of maintenance and pay. This is just what would go in your pocket otherwise. A ship owner runs the risk of foul weather, a bad trade deal, or a mutiny. When rolling to determine your profit, if any of the d20 rolls are a 1, roll on the ship ownership complications table, or the DM may create a suitable complication. Your crew makes a bad bargain, you see no profits. Your ship and crew have been pressed into military service to hunt pirates for 1d4 months. A temple related to the sea or trade has accused your crew of disrespecting the gods, and no one will do business with your ship and crew. You lose 5d20 gold per month for 1d6 months until the temple is mollified. Now that's what you have to pay in to continue your ship to function. Your crew mutinies and is on the run from you. Or your crew is caught smuggling illegal goods. Look, things can happen when you're not supervising them, right? You're the adventurers. You're off hunting dragons in the mountains. You just own a ship that is performing tasks in the background for you. Well, in this case, the crew mutinied. Or not, well, I mean, they mutinied in option 5. In 6, they're imprisoned and your ship is impounded. And woo, you want to talk about running a fun little side adventure or a dungeon. Or a social interaction to get your ship out of impoundment in like the harbor master's area of the docks. Just use modify memory to help the crew remember them swearing undying loyalty to you, and they work for free because they love you. Yeah, it's that easy. And you know what? That would be a very interesting, right? In a Lithid, captain. So instead of like a battering ram, maybe he actually has sort of like mechanical, like a grappler tendril on the front of the ship, and can actually like go and like try and grapple other ships and like pull them in, kind of like they would pull a brain into their mouths. And then of course you just woohoo. You give a little bit of a mental overhaul to the crew, and of course they're gonna love you, Captain Elithid here. And there we go. That's what's in this supplement. Now, downtime activities are in the PHB under Chapter 8 Adventuring, 181, okay? Something to remember as well. Food and water. How much food and water do you need per day, especially if you're hardworking? What can you do between adventures, which is 186, 187 is the start? Researching, recuperating, practicing a profession, crafting. In Xanathar's guide, that starts here on page 124. Well, I guess it goes, I think, 122 or 123. You can go carousing, right? You pull into port. You can make magic items. You can purchase magic items. There's all sorts of things for you to be able to do. Something else to consider in the player's handbook is in the equipment chapter of 5. Well, number one, if you want to purchase a galley or a keelboat, galley's 30,000 gold, keelboat's 3,000. How about that? A nice rowboat is 50 gold. And it also gives you a base speed here, but if you want to supplement that, if you're using the Unearthed Arcana experimental rules, then you can. Trade goods is very good to consider if you're running adventures for that. Lifestyle expenses. Every day, right? If you want to give your sailors a to budget out poor lifestyle expenses, like not just their pay, but to feed them and to give them water, you'd be budgeting out supplies at 2 silver pieces per day. That's behind my head here, and unfortunately, if I scroll down, it'll just take me to the next page. So this is page 157. If you'd like to take a look for yourself. He had a roper on the front of the ship. Yeah, see, we're using what's around us. Wretched, squalid, poor. It's giving you. If we go poor, a poor lifestyle means going without the comforts available in a stable community. Simple food and lodgings, threadbare clothing, and unpredictable conditions result in a sufficient, though probably unpleasant, experience. Your accommodations might be a room in a flop house or in the common room above a tavern. You benefit from some legal protections, but you still have to contend with violence, crime, and disease. People at this lifestyle level tend to be unskilled laborers, costermongers, peddlers, thieves, mercenaries, and other disreputable types. So here we are. You know, you could budget out. You know, you tell your cook, here's your budget. This is what I want to feed. If you and you could do the minutia if you really want, or you can condense it to we've budgeted for, you know, a month of supplies at this level, and unless a disaster occurs, that's what we're going to be receiving. Services for travel and spell casting. And by the way, self-sufficiency can be a thing too. And don't forget, magic can make food and water appear if your DM allows it. Not all DMs do. But if your DM allows the creation of magical food and water, then there you go. You could save yourself a big cost. But also remember that is extra weight that is competing with cargo and such. And I do want to go to one before we end this segment here. I do want to go to recurring expenses here, right? As we're considering this, there are things that that you have to maintain, or at least you have to budget for. For example, maintenance costs. If you are running a shop, you have 2 gold pieces worth of maintenance expenses per day that you're incurring. Whether you're setting money aside for, I don't know, repairing your roof, or whether it's one thing or another, this is a breakdown of what you're generally incurring. It's not unusual for adventurers, especially after 10th level, to gain possession of a castle, tavern, or another piece of property. They might buy it with their hard-won loot, take it by force, obtain it in a lucky draw from a deck of many things, or acquire it by other means. The maintenance cost table shows the per diem, upkeep cost for any such property. The cost of a normal residence isn't included here because it falls under lifestyle expenses, as discussed in the player's handbook. Maintenance expenses need to be paid every 30 days. Given that adventurers spend much of their time adventuring, staff includes a steward who can make payments in the party's absence. So you have your total cost per day, and then the player's handbook explains the difference between a skilled hireling and an untrained one. If we come back to services, you are paying a skilled worker 2 gold pieces per day for something skilled, right? Like a master blacksmith, an accountant that has, is literate and has gone to school, something along those lines. Someone who's untrained is going to be getting 2 silver pieces per day. Now, keep that in mind, by the way. If you go to work and you're a farmhand, you're being paid in this economy that's being presented to you. It could be different on Eberron or in Ravnica. You're being paid 2 silver pieces because it's an untrained skill, right? You're digging ditches, you're chopping down trees. If you're a specialist in something, then you'll be paid 2 gold pieces per day. Steamed hams is what I call good berries. It's a regional dialect. That's Roger pulling in the steamed hams meme. Make sure you can cast Aurora Borealis too. Druids would be good on long journeys because of good berries. If a DM allows good berries unmodified, then that could be. It is light food. It's good for a day's nutrition, but bear in mind that the human body might rebel against it because it's stayed empty. Right? If you're just eating a berry, you might end up suffering from constipation, or the body might not know how to handle the physical pangs of hunger. Because having nutrition is different than being full. As well, nutrition doesn't necessarily include water or hydration. So Goodberry is a contentious spell in a lot of regards. I'm not saying you're wrong, XCat, but just be aware that there could be considerations to go with that spell, or even create food and water, or Hero's Feast, because some DMs might not allow for food or water creation in the campaign, or if they do, it would be sort of like an emergency because of a high cost. So I don't know, it uses 50 gold pieces worth of components. So look, that's a month, that's almost a month's pay just to get a basic meal for basic nutrition. Something along those lines. So we get into downtime activities, and we'll talk about encounters on the sea and in the air. But you know what? I think we should take a break. Let's get a snack or something, and when we come back, let's make the ships cook. As we are going to start making the crew of the ship that, I don't know what it'll be. Will it be an airship? Will it be a war galley? Will it be, I don't know, a trading vessel? I don't even know yet. But let's start by making the cook. If an army marches on its stomachs, sailors then, I guess, swing by their stomachs as well. And let's have some fun doing so. So I'll see you all in about 10 minutes, okay? Let's take a break.